Welcome to the Better Outcomes podcast, where we discuss all things leadership, sales, and communication in Australian business. At Better Outcomes Training, we provide world-class training solutions for businesses who want to arm their teams with cutting-edge skills to lead better, sell better, and enjoy more success, purpose, and profit from the work they do. For a full breakdown of all the courses we offer, visit www.better-outcomes.com.au. There's also a link in the description. Now, on to today's podcast. Enjoy. There you go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Outcomes Training Podcast. I'm here, the famous Paul Harrison. How are you today, Paulie?
Absolutely electrifying, cuz. Thank you. Fresh off a hot week in Sydney, which was awesome. Exhausted, but still very happy, very grateful to be here. How are you, my man?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm getting old. Had a big week on the tools, teaching people, which is just, turns out I'm still not very good at teaching people and watching them do what I like to do, but I'm getting there. I'm getting better. And I'm putting some new strategies around that by instead of standing underneath them while they're up in the knuckle booms trying to do their job and me yelling at them like a lunatic, I got radios and gave them radios so I couldn't fit to them.
See, up there for thinking, down there for dancing, mate.
Always on the improve, mate. Always on the improve. It's been a good week. It's been a busy week again. And there was something that we came up against yesterday that you said we should talk about, which is stress in the workplace, managing stress in the workplace. And just talking with you a little bit around this, there seems to be quite a bit to it, quite a few different variations of the same wording. So I thought it'd be quite good to get into.
Sure.
And as always, we'll start with maybe defining stress in the workplace. What do we mean by that, mate?
Yeah, I think stress in the workplace is, maybe physical and mental and emotional stuff that kind of keeps you away from operating at your optimum level. I guess that would be sort of be my observation of it. The way it could play out, I think, is people feeling under the pump, feeling like they can't cope, I suppose, also physiologically as well. I think that there's certain things I'm looking for to be aware of where my stress levels are. And I think there's different types of stress as well. I think there's a physical stress, like the stress I get when I'm facilitating, or when you've had a full day. You and I get to the end of the day and we're absolutely finished because you've given everything physically, mentally, and emotionally. I think that's almost like a good stress. But then I think that there's another stress often that comes in that is something that takes away from people and overwhelms people massively. And I think people would probably have their own perception of stress as an individual, rather than sort of a one-size-fits-all type of approach. But that would probably be my closest estimation of it, mate.
Yeah.
No, how about yourself?
That sounds pretty spot on to me. My job's very physical, has been for a while. That'll change soon. When I know that forms of stress, when I get tired, I've learned to figure out my trigger points and learn to be self-aware of when I'm getting overloaded or overwhelmed.
Beautiful.
To me, one of the big indicators, or one of the major things of stress for me, is unmade decisions. Seem to bear on me quite a lot, an unmade decision, or if you've got a lot of stuff going on in the background, it doesn't have to always be at work. If you've got a few things that you're juggling at that time, and maybe you're waiting on something or waiting on something else to trigger that little event or something, it can be quite stressful holding on to things like that, I find, anyway, for me. So I've learned to deal with that through making lists and working out what is in my control and what's not, and what I can focus my energies on, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it has to be pretty common. Every workplace has to involve some level of stress. I don't think, I little bit think about it, there's not many jobs where you wouldn't have some form of stress. Obviously, some have a lot more than others, and it obviously depends on the individual and what they're taking on as well, I would suggest. But it's got to be reasonably common, stress in the workplace, doesn't it? It must affect everyone to some form or another.
I think it does, cuz, and I think the more that you climb that corporate ladder, or the further you go, even if you're in a corporate, then you got that desire of climbing that corporate ladder. You're going to have more people you're responsible for. You're going to feel it more, which is why you would this is what my focus is on. Is yes, I want to teach people to be able to manage stress, absolutely, and I'll give them practical, tactical things that they can actually utilize to reduce their stress, and maybe we'll talk about a few of those today. But here's the other thing. And this is something I really want to focus on with my clients is I'd way rather not just work on reducing stress, which is the nice contributing thing that we all want to do for people and reduce suffering in the workplace, which is a strong thing. But I want to build resiliency in people as well.
Yes.
So there's sort of like this.
Yeah.
There is a lot of talk about resiliency, and that's fine as well. But I'm very aware there are some people who don't like that term resiliency, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. But we have a saying in South Africa. I think it's a Xhosa saying, but they say you prepare the child for the road. You don't prepare the road for the child, and that's why a big focus on what I do a lot of the time is to build massive resiliency in people and give people tools to be able to be more resilient. Because it's the two sides here. It's effectively if I can build resiliency in somebody, the challenges they're going to face can get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they'll be able to smash through that. If I just try and work on just making the environment a whole lot sweeter, it's never really going to be like that, because people are, especially as you continue to climb the ladder, because effectively people are going to have different challenges and different motivating factors, and people playing politics, and it's going to happen. Yes. So whilst I will work on helping give people tools and techniques to be able to manage stress effectively. But bottom line is I want to be able to really be able to work with building resiliency in people. So they go through a tough time, they're able to deal with it, they weather it, and they move on to the next thing, And again, particularly, and this was a big conversation the last 3 days that I had in Sydney, which was all focused on emerging world-class leaders. So there was 12 people in the room, and we're working on their leadership skills, and they're certainly emerging world-class leaders now. So, and my mentality for people like that is they've got big desire in the workplace environment. They're very capable with what they do as their area of expertise, but now their subject matter expertise is now becoming tied in with leadership as well. And leadership, you can be a great subject matter expert in what you do. You can be a great accountant, you can be a great marketer, but now you take on a leadership position. Now we need to build on a lot of those resiliency aspects as well. So it's being able to not just manage stress, but also build resiliency. And I think that the more I can support people to build resiliency, the easier it's going to be for them to deal with stress as well. Because I think a lot of the time it's the uncertainty. I think, to your point, uncertainty very often causes stress, and that can be uncertainty in a lot of areas, including things like, I think we get different types of stress, but the type of stress I think that keeps you up at night is the type of stress that comes from not always feeling that we have the confidence or the skill sets to deal with those challenges that we face in the workplace environment. And yes, you'll know from times we've worked together and we've trained, that's what we focus on. What do we focus on? Focus on building confidence or professional self-esteem and the confidence that comes with that. And then teaching strategies, techniques, and understandings. All are practical, they are repeatable, and they are and you can apply them consistently. So you can use them with intention. And very often people start using these types of approaches, and they get better outcomes, and then effectively their stress levels are going to go down from that point of view as well.
Yes. Resiliency is, like you said, it gets a bit controversial sometimes when you start talking about that. But if you stop someone and get them to look back at what they've done and what they've been through, and then they realize that they can do that, then the next step isn't that far. It may seem like it.
Yeah.
One thing that I had to try and deal with was just playing what was in front of me. Not. I don't know about everyone else, but I used to spend a lot of time, and I can find myself, if something's stressing me a lot, like an unmade decision or a scenario that's playing out, I can just almost lapse into a state of imagining playing out different scenarios of what happens if he says this, or what happens if this happens. And you waste so much energy on that, because 95% of that's never going to happen. And there was a few times in my life over a few different jobs that really taught me there's no point thinking about everything the night before. You're better off just rocking up to the job, knowing you can do it, knowing you can deal with whatever gets put in front of you, and just going, right, how are we doing this? What's happening? Because the amount of energy that you waste on worrying about things and imagining up scenarios can really put you in a worse headspace. Does that make
Absolutely.
yeah, just learning to learning what's in my control and what's out of my control was a big factor, and just playing what was
Yep.
in front of me from there.
And what do you think the problem with that is? Because with regards to, if we look at those three areas, it's what's in your control, what's in your area of influence, and what's in your area of concern. So what I mean by that is those three circles. Maybe you've seen them in one of the
Yeah,
workshops we've run, but it's things that are in your area of control. So is that, are you having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee? At this time, I'm hoping it's a cup of tea. Otherwise, it's going to be a, yep. Otherwise, it's
it's
going to
it's
be
a it's
a,
a cup of tea disguised as vodka. No, it's just a cup of tea, mate. Like I said, I'm old now.
what's in your influence. So, what can you actually put your energy into? Here's where I find a lot of people get unresourceful is when they are pouring loads and loads and loads of energy into something that's outside of their area of control
Yeah,
or influence. So they have no control over it. And again, I think it's part of human hardwiring. And to quote a great doctor who once said, your brain is not designed to make you happy. Your brain is designed to keep you alive.
yeah,
And I think it's a natural aspect that people have, which is they're pouring lots of that physical, mental, and emotional energy into something that's outside of their area of control or influence. And here's the other thing, cuz if you do that, if you put all that physical, mental, and emotional energy for the day into something you're not going to get a return from, that's where I believe people become very unresourceful. So you think about it, it's like we make the worst decisions when we're exhausted.
mm,
So it's like if you get to the beginning of the week and you think, you know what, this week is going to be a great week. I'm going to get super fit this week. I'm going to cook all of my own food. It's going to be half an hour, and you go to work, and you absolutely have an absolute terrible day, and you come back and you've got no energy left because you've been wasting your energy on something that's outside of your control. Then effectively you come back and you're not going to spend half an hour making that good meal. So that homemade meal. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit that Uber Eats app. You know what I'm saying?
yes, yes, I know precisely what you're saying. It's yeah, we've all been there. Yeah, best intentions, and when you're tired, just see you later. They go out the window, don't they?
So what would you say to somebody who's sitting here right now and thinking, you know what, I get what these guys are saying with regards to things in my control, things in my influence, and things outside of my area of control or influence, but I'm concerned over. How would you get people? What insight would you give people to change that, to sort that out?
The way I do it is I make a list of everything that's bothering me or everything that needs to be done, that my brain says has to be done.
Yeah,
And this is the way that I deal with it. I list everything out, and then I just sit there and look at them and cross out the ones that don't have to be done straight away or aren't important or things that I effectively can't control. Like I'm waiting on Paul to get back to me with this report. There's nothing I can do about that. I might be able to give you a follow-up email or a quick call, but there's no point wasting time on that and energy. And then focusing your energies on what you can control. Work those out. Order a priority. That's how I do it. It's probably not the best way. It's probably not the best
listen, if it
strategy,
works
but
for you, mate.
it's what works for me at the
Yeah,
and like I said, I'm old now and I'm pretty self-aware of all my all my issues and what my like trigger points are and when I'm starting to get stressed, which is usually based around being tired as well.
yeah,
So when I'm like you said, when I'm tired and run down, I'm really aware of the fact that I'm not going to be in the best frame of mind to start making some real decisions. So it's time to either switch off, pull the plug, or get some recovery in, or even speak to the guys around me and say, listen,
yeah.
just watch me for a few minutes because I'm not doing the best. Yeah. Yourself?
Yeah, listen, what I do is I tell people to, well, it's the exercise I use as well. I'll give it to everybody here, but it's like, um, normally the interesting thing is, I think is a lot of the time people are not always aware of where their thought processes are going. So I think particularly if you're working on something and you're working on a spreadsheet or something like that, and your brain can be away doing something else and
Mm.
worrying about something else. And very often it's almost on the subconscious, and people don't pick up always where their thought processes are going because on the subconscious, effectively, your mind is not going to tell you about it. But here's the thing, your body will start telling you about it. So if I'm ever sitting there and I feel in my gut, it's like something's not right here. There's something what I have to first do is I have to be able to identify what is my thought pattern. So what I'll ask myself is, what am I focusing on right now? Because remember this, whatever you focus on dictates how you feel. How you feel dictates your frame of mind dictates actions, actions dictate outcomes. So I can feel a physiological reaction. Maybe that I can start feeling my adrenaline start to go in my legs, and maybe my heart sort of increases a little bit. There's something that's going on here. So I ask myself the question, what am I focusing on right now? Which brings very often that thought process into something I can consider now. And if it's in my area of control or influence, I'll act on it and I'll invest energy into it. If it's not, then what I will do is I want to ask myself a question and that question is, do I want to waste my finite energy on this? Nine times out of 10, my answer is no, of course. Because the thing is, again, coming from the base of as soon as I'm exhausted, I make bad decisions. As soon as I'm stressed, I make bad decisions. So asking that question, it's a little bit of a pattern interrupt with the thought process, but here's the other thing. It gets you becoming very aware of your thought process and how you think. And that is very often a confronting thought process, because I think a lot of the time we have thought processes that we wouldn't acknowledge, and we certainly wouldn't share with other people very often. Carl Jung, I think it was Jung, who spoke about the shadow self, and that there's good and bad that runs through everybody. And the thing is, of course, people very often want to be seen in the best possible light, as we do, all of the stuff. I think often people can become very confronted with their thought processes, but it's part of being human, as long as you're not acting on them and hurting people. But people become aware of that, and I think that puts them on the back foot a little bit. But a beautiful way to be able to change your focus is asking yourself a very powerful question, because again, questions allow you to discover things, and as we know, discovery is way more powerful than disclosure. So the question is, what am I grateful for right now? And that just puts the focus back onto things that actually give me that good energy, that good feeling.
Yep.
I hope that made sense.
Always makes sense, mate. So stress, where does it come from in the workplace? I think poor communication is a massive one.
Yep.
Agree with that? I think it's one.
How would you say poor communication? Talk to me about poor communication, because I completely agree with you on that.
It seems to me that there's a lot that stems from poor communication. There's a lot of things that happen if you're not communicating well, from everything from time management and deadlines to the specifics of the task I want you to complete, to even to basic stuff like interpersonal skills, whether you're getting along with someone or not. Maybe you've got off the wrong foot with them, so you then see them as a difficult person to be with, or things like that. There's a lot that comes from not being able to communicate properly, either get your point across or deal with others. That's where I think a lot of problems come from in the workplace. Yeah.
And what do you think stopping people from doing that? Because I agree with you, but let's pinpoint problems and then potential solutions here as well.
I think the main problem is that people don't understand their own value. They don't understand what they can provide to that environment.
Yeah.
And they either don't take on enough, or they get others to take on too much for them. And there's no real interpersonal play between the people will say, yeah, I can do that, and they can't when they know they're overloaded. They're not, maybe there's honesty and trust issues going on there as well, which people is also pleasers. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that can be an issue. I think that also people don't want to be seen as if they are, if they are over explaining something. It's like, well, you sort of, if I want somebody to be perfectly clear on something, I want to go in and explain it in a higher amount of detail. But then, of course, one of the concerns that people have is, well, I'm going to get a negative label put on me, which is an interesting concept. And, often I think people don't always interpret it in the best possible ways that they could. But I think that, again, even down to definition, mate, and we spoke about this a lot this week, definition of particular words. What do you mean by that word? What do you mean by as soon as possible? That type of thing.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
precisely.
yeah, I think those are big issues. I also think that there are a lot of people, and we have conflicts with people. There's so much talk about getting different points of view and stuff like that. But what people don't realize is that different points of view are going to have different value and belief systems. And I'm not talking about
Yes.
anything outside of the workplace. I'm talking about, well, how I believe I would communicate with somebody and how I expect them to believe to me. How I expect them to communicate with me. And you think about it, that stereotypical scenario, if I'm coming over to somebody who's highly, highly, highly technical, and I'm a very gregarious, outgoing person, and let's say this person sees me coming, oh God, no, it's Paul. He's going to ask me about the weekend and the holiday and the family and all this. And I just go, I want to get on with work. There's a natural, we have different value and belief systems around communication very often. And if I'm over the top, I'm too engaging, it's like, oh, GBH of the ears. That's the first thing. But then if that person speaks to me, just Paul, could you please do A, B, and C? I might put the label on them of being a little bit blunt and rude. And it's fascinating. And again, cuz I'm going to come back to it. If people are able to see the value they bring and therefore be charitable with the interpretations of other people's behaviors, we would have a lot less friction. But very often people see something that's kind of foreign to them, and then all of a sudden they're going to put a negative label on it. And I think it comes from that insufficiency very often.
Yeah, just stop and think about the other person and where they're coming from, and maybe what role they play or their beliefs or how they are.
And
And
maybe they're not being condescending.
yeah, maybe they're not. Maybe that's just the way they talk. They don't know
Absolutely.
any better. So dealing with difficult people, Paulie, that can be a
Yes.
massive stress point in the workplace. And I know that you've got some techniques around this. I've got my own set of techniques, then they're wildly different. But yeah, but a lot of them are the same and they come back to the basics. So if you've got a problem with someone at work or you're having to deal with what you see as difficult people, how do you go about it, mate? What can if someone out there's got a problem with difficult people at work,
Yeah.
or they themselves have been labeled a difficult person to deal with,
Yeah.
then how do you go about that, mate? How can we get some teaching and some learning into some people?
Well, there's a couple of answers to this. So let's start with if you've been labeled as a difficult person yourself. And maybe you can take that aspect with regards to the accusations audits that I know you're across, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
But here's something I want to say. Here's something I want to say, and for anybody who's listening to this, check yourself first. And what I mean by that is if you're having conflict with everybody in the workplace, maybe you're the problem.
Yes.
Maybe your style of communication or how you communicate with people, it's not them, it's you. Maybe. Now, I hope after training with me, people be aware on that. But very, very often, I have people who say that I just work with idiots, or I just work with lazy people, or I just work with, whatever the label is. And it's just like, you're telling me now that of the 150 people you work with, everybody is bad news. Well, not everybody, maybe just half of them. It's like, you got to realize that maybe you might be the common denominator between all of this. So my
Yes.
first thing is, and I'm more than happy to have conversations with people about this, but if you have people who are consistently having bust ups with people, it's maybe if you're the person who's having the bust ups with people, if you take accountability for that and think, okay, I am a common denominator between here, it's going to be a much quicker solution than trying to change everybody else. Because I do know this happens. And again, that comes very, very much to that victim mindset and that blame mindset very often. And I'm not saying that people don't deal with difficult people. Of course they do. But if everybody you're interacting with, you're having conflict with, that's an issue. It really, really is. And I see it. I see it a lot more than what I should, particularly because I work with a lot of people who've got very much a sort of growth mindset around certain things. So that's my first indicator. Second thing is let's say that it's not everybody, it's just one or two people I have conflict with. And first is perfectly normal, okay? But it's interesting because whenever I ask a question, I'll say, and it depends on what the course is, but very often with communication is how do you communicate with difficult people or what have you? That often comes up as a personalized request that people want me to deal with. And here's my take on it is that I say, okay, how many of you can think of have to work with somebody who you consider to be a difficult person? And my God, you want to see hands go up? Every single hand goes up like lightning, okay, like lightning. Now, the fascinating thing is is that I go back to what I say, and it's like I've worked with maybe 10,000 people, and there's only 4 people I would never work with again. There's some people I prefer to work with that I would absolutely love to work with. There's some people that, it's sort of medium rare, but there's only 4 people I would never work with. Now, this leads me to believe one of two things. Either monsters don't come to training, and that might be an aspect, okay? Because I hear these stories about these monsters that my clients have to work with the whole time. And so that's one thing. Maybe monsters don't come to training, and I get that point. I certainly do. But the other side is maybe the vast majority of people just see things in very different ways, and they operate in very different ways, and they operate purely with the best they have in that particular moment. So that's my first approach. But then I say, okay, so how many of you, let's say you had to have a meeting this, if it's a Friday afternoon, you get an email and, you're looking forward to the weekend until you get the email. And the email comes through and it says you've got to have a meeting with that person that you really dislike. I said, what's just happened to your weekend? And 9 times out of 10 people say, oh, it's just terrible. Now I'm just focusing on having to meet this person and it's terrible. And my whole weekend goes out the window. And then you come to Monday morning and you walk in and you're raging already. You're already in a fight or flight mentality. You're not going to say and do good things. So I believe the reason that happens is we're sitting there thinking about this person and we start dwelling on all of the negative interactions we've had with them. And the more we're dwelling on those, the bigger those factors are becoming. And I think the more riled up we get, the more rented space in our minds we're giving to that person. So we get our own selves worked up before we get into the meeting room. We get into the meeting room, and now we've already got Eye of the Tiger in my ears playing, And you're not going to be in the best frame of mind to be able to deal with that person, okay? Because chances are they're probably going to have the same feeling about you, and they're going to project it, and you're going to project it. Nothing good comes from that. So my take on that is, if I'm really dealing with somebody I dislike, and it might be a values and beliefs thing. They might have very different ways of communicating with people. They might do things I think are disrespectful, but it's borderline. They may act in a passive aggressive manner. They may do things that I do not like and I would not do. And that's what we mean different. But, we're made up of all types here. So what I want to be able to do is, if it's important to me to be in the right frame of mind to go in and have that meeting, and I always say self-preservation is number one. What I mean by that is, if I lose you to the dark frame of mind, the fight or flight mentality, you can barely remember your name sometimes, let alone what those clever words are that you're going to say. If I lose you to that, it's all over. You're not going to say and do good things. You're not going to get good outcomes. So what I do is I have an exercise for people, and I say to them, listen, this exercise is going to keep you in the right frame of mind, but it's not easy. But it is very simple, but it's not easy. Okay, it's simple, it's powerful, but it's not easy. And everybody's like got the pens ready, they're ready to go. And it's like, okay, so here's what you have to do. Before you go into the meeting, you have to write down 5 things that you like about this person, or 5 things that you could appreciate about this person, or 5 things maybe you could respect about this person. So what happens is, now we have to go and look for something good about this person. And this becomes very difficult because we've conditioned our way of thinking towards that person. Logically, we know we shouldn't, but we've all done it. And effectively, we're building up more and more of that negativity towards them. Now, what I need people to do is to shift that negativity into positivity. So what can you find about that person that you like? Maybe they're hardworking. Maybe they're always on time. Maybe they dress well. Maybe, they've been a good mate to somebody else. Maybe they are good with their family. Maybe they've done sport outside of work that takes a lot of commitment, and something that you get to focus on. But here's what starts to happen. Firstly, it's not easy, but you start to focus on things that you could like about somebody, and that gets that focus into a more positive frame of mind, which means that you might go in and you're not going to be projecting all that negativity when you're interacting with them. Cuz, does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Does. Makes perfect sense. Especially if you spent all weekend, we spoke about it just earlier, half the time you spend all weekend winding yourself up over scenarios that never happen. You walk in there tired, drained, ready to fight. It's not a good start, is it? Yep.
No.
No. Regardless of what the meeting's about, it's not going to go well. Not of that kind of mentality at all.
Absolutely.
No.
And it's so difficult to do because um, we have to run the risk of being wrong in our previous assumptions. And very often our egos don't want us to be wrong. When I say ego, I'm not talking about, again, beating on our chest, telling our world how great I am. I'm talking about the desire to be right. And if you've made a negative assumption of somebody in the past, and we've all done it, let's get over this, folks. We've all told stories about baddies. Maybe we've been the baddie in somebody else's story as well. But it's whatever I'm going to focus on. And what I've found is, believe it or not, man, there have been times where I've done this, I've utilized this exercise, I've got in, and I haven't had a great meeting with them, but I've had a better meeting. It wasn't great, but it was better than what the alternative was.
Yeah.
And the other thing I found is that the more you get to know somebody, the easier it is to like them. There's actually been people I've had real problems with who I got to know a little bit better, and they actually became very close people and good people that I would consider very good people, which were and my perception was very different from my initial one or two engagements with them as well. So it is a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool. It's not easy, but it's very, very powerful.
I think it's a brilliant way of thinking about difficult people to deal with.
Yeah.
Really
And
do.
something else as well, Cuz, is I asked the question, is it difficult people or difficult behaviors? Why do you think I would ask that question?
Because it can be someone's behavior or their beliefs or the way they act that can set you off because you don't like it. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be. You can not like someone by the way they treat other people.
Mhm.
And they might not treat you that way. But then if you turn the way you look at them, like you said, the positivity, think of the 5 things that they're good at, it changes the way you look at them.
Absolutely.
So
100%. The other thing on that as well is that if I believe somebody's a bad person, then it's almost like I've got the moral high ground to go after them. Then I'm fully justified in my approach. And that's not a good situation. And people say it shouldn't be like that. I agree it shouldn't be like that. But I can't teach people just for what should happen. I'm teaching people for what I see happening. And we need to be very clear on that.
That's right. And I know I've been guilty of it in the past where you can upset someone or you can be upset at someone by what we always talk about, their values, their beliefs, where they're coming from. Maybe even the footy team that they support can put you offside instantly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you start going down that, well, I don't like him because he supports South Africa and they
Yeah.
beat the All Blacks. I don't like that idea.
Yeah.
Especially lately because we've been getting flogged by you lot. But that's besides the point. We're talking about work now.
Absolutely.
And I guess the other thing, like you said, we have to talk about is that, or the first thing is an accusation audit where you're trying to, maybe you need to repair a relationship.
Yeah.
You've been on the bus stop with someone, or you've got to deal with a difficult person, whether they've been difficult from the start or there's something's happened and you need to make an attempt you need that relationship back. Maybe you can't move forward without it. Maybe you have to deal with this person all the time. You don't want to be wasting all these energies. And it's something that I learned and I've adapted from Chris Voss's book,
Yeah.
the Never Split the Difference. Um, an accusation audit is basically, think of it as going to the person cap in hand. Like you said, putting your ego aside, thinking of all the good things about them first.
Yeah.
You're going to want to repair that relationship. Start with a simple question along the lines of, are we good? Are we getting along okay? I'm feeling some tension. What's the story? Because if it's you were getting along with someone and all of a sudden something's happened and
Yeah.
you don't know what, it could have been something you said, something they've overheard, taken out of context. It can be something simple. But if you make the first approach with what's going on, sometimes it can be a simple fix. Other times you can go with, listen, you need to, I've done wrong. This was my mistake. I did this. I've said that. I put you offside. Apologize, get up and go to them and show them that you're willing to work with them,
Yeah.
willing to, clean the slate and start again and work out exactly where your differences are and maybe they've got the problem with you or what you believe in or the way you work or the way you talk. It's usually something reasonably simple around that. And you can address it. Maybe you can fix it. Maybe you can't, but at least it'll be out in the open there. Nine
Yeah.
times out of 10, when you approach someone, like that and say, listen, we've got a problem here. I think it's my fault. Not really sure what happened. Let's sit and have a talk through it, see where we're going. That can be a really good start to mending that relationship. Yeah.
Beautiful. Guys, can you expand on why that's so powerful and if there was any potential downsides of it as well? Just for anybody listening who really likes the concept of that, what does it do for you and what could potential downsides be of it? Just so people are aware of that as well.
It shows that you're willing to work with someone. It shows that you value their relationship and you're interested in working with them and mending the fence and trying to relieve yourself of whatever stress or dramas are going on there.
Yeah.
Potential downside is it could be irreparable. It could be a relationship that you're not going to get back. But at least you know where you stand. At least you won't have that constant nagging. And if it's something you have to move on from, then you have to move on from it and just, find out a way to get around things.
Yeah.
I know you've come across this a lot, Paulie. Is this something you use often, or?
Yeah.
I've only been four people out of 10,000, so I get a lot.
Well, I'm kind of fortunate that I'm in a situation where I don't have a lot of conflict with people at the moment, but certainly that hasn't always been the case in the past. There was a time where I had a lot of conflict with a lot of people, and for a number of reasons. I think a lot of the time was, particularly in business, my own insecurities. And also I had no idea on communication. I had no idea on rapport. I had no idea on any of the techniques we utilize and we train now. I will say this though, I think that accusations audit is great because I think it takes a lot of the sting out of their perception of you. Because especially if you're having a conversation with somebody and they don't trust you, they don't like you based on past interactions, then everything you say is being filtered through that negative perception. So you could be whispering sweet honey and it gets translated into acidic vinegar, just through that negative lens.
That's what I mean. It only has to be one thing that you may have done and completely unintentionally.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it might be something from their past that they've seen a repeated pattern on, and you get looked at through that rose-colored glass, so to speak, and tainted with the same brush as everyone else. So
absolutely.
I think that's what you mean by that, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. And I have seen, unfortunately, if I was to use that type of approach, I would only use it with what I believe to be well-meaning people. So we've had an interaction with people that 99% of people like and they get on well with, and just we've had some kind of clash, and they are well-meaning in their approach. And by that, I mean they're not looking to take advantage of a situation, because I have also seen an approach like that be used as almost like a negotiating or a bargaining chip. And what I mean by that is if I say, it's my fault and we got off to this, they're almost thinking, okay, well, that's a credit. That's a credit to me, so that when it comes to the price, you're going to drop it 10% because you made this mistake in the past. And I think that people might take that type of approach. That's why, particularly with negotiations, I want to make sure that people have as many options as possible. I think that can be, I think if somebody used that type of approach, it's a very short-term gain, but you're going to foster long-term resentment, I think, in the long term. And some people might say, well, Paul, I'm only doing this negotiation once, like buying a car from this dealer, take that type of approach. But I believe that the world is small and it's getting smaller. And I think a lot of the time, if you genuinely do the right thing by people, I think the right things will work out. If you're ripping people apart, actually, I'll tell you this. There's a few clients I'm working with and a few clients I've worked with in the past who had really rough reputations for being very hard-nosed negotiators. And they have such a bad reputation that people don't want to do business with them. Because they've been that hard on the negotiation and they've been representing very, very powerful firms, and they've known it, and they've squeezed until there's nothing left, and putting people in really rough positions. And when I'm teaching people to negotiate, we say you can't scale an unfair deal. So if we're negotiating and you feel that I've squeezed you for everything and I've given nothing back, then that's going to be a rough deal moving forward. So, Yeah, it's I think a lot of time using that technique not to be taken advantage of, but just to clear the water between the two of us.
Yep. You also used a term a little bit earlier about self-preservation being the number one priority,
Yeah,
coming into fight or flight. So talk to me a little bit about that one.
yeah. When it comes down to stress, I talk a lot about keeping my clients in the right frame of mind, and what I mean by that is a positive, empowered mental and emotional state. And I don't talk about that as sort of hugs and high fives. It's not that everybody's smiling and happy. It's more so that you have full functionality of your brain. And an analogy of this is a positive, empowered mental and emotional state. You have the full functionality. You can think clearly. You're relaxed, like you're sitting talking to your mate. You're relaxed. You can think of all those brilliant words that you need to say. But when we get to a degree of stress, great example of this, as you would know from presenting, is we can get up there on stage and we can feel fight or flight starting to kick in. Now, actually, what starts to happen is the prefrontal cortex reduces in size, so we don't have the ability to think clearly in our brains anymore. That's why I think a lot of time people are terrified of presenting, getting out and presenting in front of the audience, and they can't think clearly, don't say good things and get good outcomes. So when it comes to stress, the more stressed people become, the easier it is for them to go to fight or flight, say and do the wrong thing. So whenever I'm training people, particularly to deal with difficult conversations, particularly if you're dealing with, people who are have a tendency to get aggressive or try and overwhelm you as part of a technique or what have you. As soon as you start to feel that degree of overwhelm, we have techniques called power lines that my clients will be familiar with to actually buy some time. Because if you're in that state of overwhelm, that self-preservation is not there, you're going to agree to something that you're then going to pay a price for later on, or you're going to get bullied into a position, and that's no good. That's no good. It's got to be self-preservation first. If you're not in the right frame of mind, don't go into a meeting that is going to be high stakes. And if you have no options, then use some of those techniques like those power lines to be able to buy you some time. Lawyers and mediators use this a lot when any legal or dispute or what have you is happening and people get too worked up. They call a timeout using one of these techniques because they know nothing good's going to come after a certain level. You start to feel that adrenaline starting to flow, and I can think, yeah, this is not going well, and I'll get out of that situation. So self-preservation, number one. Also, getting good sleep. There you go.
Getting good sleep.
Yeah.
I agree with the getting good sleep part. Yeah, interesting. So we're going to go into a little bit of soft skills and hard skills here, because when you talk about self-preservation being the number one priority, and you talk about fight or flight and being in a good, positive, empowered mental state, I've already gone to a completely separate place where self priority is the number one key, because what I do for work, you've got to make sure that you're in a very good position in terms of you're not going to get crushed or hurt.
Absolutely.
Same words meaning different things. So,
Yeah.
high risk work, lot going on, lots of pressure, tight deadlines, lots of equipment in the same area. We got a couple of younger guys on, I won't say younger, because they are younger than me. I'll say less
When they're
experienced.
like 42, yeah, 42,
Yeah,
43,
42.
mate.
It's just child. And I've been training them up at work, and we've had a couple of discussions with them where they're putting themselves in the wrong positions physically,
Yeah.
literally in the wrong position. And we're a tight crew. We are always looking out for everyone, but it puts that added level of stress.
Sure.
Like if you've got a history of putting yourself in bad positions and I know it,
Yeah.
then I've got to look at that as well. I can't, I've got to take my mind off one thing,
Yeah.
do something else. And like you said, if I'm as it's quite funny, there's one of the guys, it was a few weeks ago, and I guess I start to take things for granted, which you do in your job. Doesn't matter what you do, you'll have a certain set of things that you do every day, and
Yeah.
you're unaware of doing it. It's like you're in a
Sure.
flight day. Okay. And we're
Conscious
at a job city.
competence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The beautiful part of that is when you get into a flow state and you're relaxed and you're comfortable with what you're doing, regardless of what it is, it allows your mind to kind of ease out a little bit and look at the bigger picture and start to see other things as well. So we're at gantries, we put big bits of steel up, and we're in the city. This particular job, street closures, big cranes stacked in one area. We had a new guy, and really nice guy. He was doing quite well. Power lines, everything was going on. We were happy. We were doing our job, and we get halfway through and we start standing this up, and I'm all relaxed, and I turn and look at him, and he has just a look on his face of absolute sheer terror.
Wow.
You know, when you can see someone is
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
and I went straight into panic mode in terms of what did I miss? I've got pedestrians, I've got cranes, I've got overhead power lines and tram lines and something, a hook come off. What's
Right.
going on? And I'm panicking. I'm going, what? Blow the whistle, stop the crane, what? And he's like, this is crazy. I've never done this before. And so I skipped over the fact that he'd never lifted a monster bit of steel up amongst all this, whereas I was taking it for granted. So it's self priority is self preservation is the number one priority, but having
Yeah.
that ability to I just completely missed it in him. I didn't realize that he'd never seen
Yeah.
it before, and he was overwhelmed by it. So once I realized that, I'm like, oh my gosh! So I had to then switch off parts of what I was concentrating on to make sure that he was okay and he was standing in the right spots because he didn't know where he was. So um, that's a bit of a twist on it, soft versus hard skills, as we always get.
Mate, I tell you what, I'll take getting into an angry debate over over a negotiated deal way before getting hit with some steel, mate. I'll tell you that much.
Well, yeah, true.
You're the unsung
The,
heroes of the city, my man.
yeah. So I was actually thinking about that the other day, and on Saturday as well when we were in there, I was trying to keep the boys calm because we were lifting big bits of steel out. And like I said, I had both in knuckle booms, 3 stories in the air. We're lifting 3-4 tons worth of gear at a time, trying to disassemble things, which is sometimes harder than putting it together because it moves a bit.
Yeah.
But trying to keep them calm. They were overexcited. They were very stressed at what they were doing because it was quite heavy. It was quite a heavy load to do, and trying to keep them calm. And I was talking to them like simple instructions, and one of them was overwhelmed completely. Couldn't
Mind blowing.
barely
Absolutely
knew his
mind
name.
blowing.
Barely. So I had to get them down and just calm them down a little bit and say,
Yeah.
this is. I can see that you're getting overwhelmed. You can, like you said earlier, you can start to spot it in people. You can start to see telltale signs, especially if you're working with people and you're working closely with people. You can start to see telltale signs of when maybe they're not in the best place mentally or physically. You can see these telltale signs come through, and I started to see that in the boys and bring them down. Like, listen, we need to calm down a bit here, and you need to tell me what you're feeling and what you're thinking, so I can tell you what's the most important things for you to concentrate on. So but I mean, surely you can see that in people you've worked with and you're close with, yeah, when they're starting to get stressed. It's something you can pick up on.
Yeah, absolutely. That I've worked with, but I'm starting to pick it up a lot more in the multi-day trainings we run, particularly as people get more and more exhausted. And their defenses come down a lot. Okay, because I mean, the thing is, man, I make no bones about this, and we've worked together before. But if I have 2 days with somebody, if I have 3 days with somebody, you better believe I'm going to push them as hard as I can. And the reason for that is, I ask no apology for it, but the reason for that is I want to make sure they get the best possible return on their time invested. So I will push people hard. And the thing is that the reality of it is that the vast majority of people I train, they do maybe 3 days of training a year, maybe 4 days of training. So it's not a regular thing for them. So they can become very, very, very tired, as you would do if I went and did your job for a day, or you did my job for a day, or we all switched around, because you get those sort of economies of getting used to it. But you can see the defenses coming down very often. It's quite beautiful, because you see connections with people, but also you can see their eyes when they talk about something that really impacts them. You can see, you can start picking up when they're trying to hide it to be some degree, but you can see where that pain and frustration level is with them very, very often. And it's a sharp edge. It's a balance that I'm walking, because I always want to be able to give them the best possible answers I can. But very often, from a point of desperation, they'll say, well, Paul, how would you deal with this in this scenario? And very often, they're thinking about one person that they've interacted with out of 200. And I've explained the concept, and they're thinking about this one person. And whilst I try and give them the best answer I can, there is additional context they're leaving out, not intentionally, but there's some context they're not providing me with. What I mean by that is because of emotion or because of the depth of context, and they think it's clear in their mind, but they're not communicating in a way, obviously, that I can see because I'm not there alongside them. But if I was standing alongside them, I might see something very different from the story they're telling me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And very often you can see somebody's reliving this experience and you can see what's going on with them. And it's quite fascinating. It's quite without sounding weird, it's quite an intimate moment that people share, which is awesome because I think that creates a huge degree of connection with people as well. But yeah, I can see the stress levels increase in somebody within a 3-4 minute section where we're talking about something, and it's I think there are some moments where everybody can see it, and there's some moments where it's a little bit more subtle. But as we get deeper, and we used to run 5 days, some of those 5-day workshops, and those were brutal. I mean, they were full on workshops, but the level of connection that people would start forming during that workshop was second to none. But their defenses all came down, and their true selves, I think, started coming out, if I can say that without sounding out there,
Oh, I fully agree with that, because you put anyone under pressure.
Yeah,
You start to put people under pressure outside of their comfort zones, outside of their normal routines, and the cracks will start to appear. You'll start to really see what their pressure points are and what they're dealing with and what they can't deal with, and everything comes kind of flooding back in. So if you put people under the pump, in a situation that they're not used to or don't spend a lot of time in, it can, like similar to the story I just told earlier, it can be really quite confronting for them. And you start to, I mean, obviously I see it in the blokes I work with and a lot of people I've worked with over the years, and you've seen so many people. So you start to see the patterns that kind of pop up that are
absolutely.
very similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mate, I'm barely halfway through my first page. There is so much to talk about on this. We should do a part two on this.
We can do a part two. I think that might
Maybe we
work
should do a
well.
part two, because I'd still like to talk about more about where stress comes from, but also about the managing and the dealing with stress, like how you can put routines in.
Yeah,
You've got some awesome strategies around dealing with common workplace issues, and even confidence, and personal self-esteem, professional self-esteem. Um, there's all sorts of stuff we can talk to, prepping for meetings, all that kind of thing. So um, what we've been through here is pretty good. It's only just the start, though. So I think what we'll do is we'll put a stop to it there.
yeah,
And then otherwise it'll become too long. We'll put a stop to it there, and then we'll come back next week, and we'll finish this off in terms of how to become more self-aware, how to deal with this, how to set yourself up, some routines, some techniques, some strategies to really start dealing with stress in the workplace and help some people out, which I know you're all over, yeah.
yeah. I think that's a beautiful idea, my man. It's the first time we've done a part two. How about that?
That's right. We probably should have done a lot more of them, but yeah, part two. So listen, this is just the start. Appreciate everyone's time once again. I've had some great feedback again during the
Yeah,
week. You ran the appreciate your time after the big week you've had. I understand you got some pretty good feedback out of that too.
yeah.
So
No,
monster week for you.
it was a phenomenal workshop. It really was. It was very blessed to be there and see the progression a lot of people made, which was great.
Excellent, mate. Excellent. Thanks everyone for watching. Stay tuned for part two on this. We'll be back next week. Paulie, thank you. See you all next week.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, everybody. Thanks so much.